Good afternoon from Felixstowe Postbed Depot. We've just loaded up. We've got a load of protective equipment going to Nucleon in France. Yep, we are delivering rad suits to a nuclear power station. Our route is 500 miles long, 811 kilometres. Will take us down to Dover, into France, down to Orland, to Saint Laurent. Or Saint Laurent. Looks like it's probably pronounced Saint Laurent. So that's our route. The truck we are in today is a Scania. It's a 620S. Now hang on, I say 620. They dropped the 620 with Euro 5 going to Euro 6. They don't make a 620. No, they don't. It's actually a 580 horsepower. That's been run through the tuners. There's the boss. That's Yasmin. Hello, Yas. No, he's not texted you back yet. He ain't gonna text you. Don't know what you're waiting for. As expected, the boss is asleep. Now, I did catch him earlier on, playing around with the one of the dangly things on the cab. Like, ooh, dangly thing, what's this? Poor, blat. No, you don't. Now, Saint Laurent power station is one of a few that we can deliver to for Nucleon. Now, in reality, I believe the power station is run by EDF, Electricity de France. They're also the owners of some of the UK's nuclear reactors, of which I've actually been to one, Asia. Which kind of dominates the coast with its full reactors. Although the AGR fleet is now coming to the end of its service life. I think it's about four more years left in Haitian, I think, something like that. In fact, some of the ones have already been taken offline now because they have reached the end of their operational life. Although right now, with Russia being the way it is, we're going to need as much non-gas generating capacity as physically possible. So that's focusing on wind turbines, solar fields, and also our lovely friend, nuclear. Now, when I went to Haitian power station, there is a nuclear flask sat in the courtyard of the visitor centre. And this particular nuclear flask is painted yellow. Most of them are painted white, but this particular one was painted yellow. It's also now a bit rusty because it's had about 40 years sat on the coast of the Irish Sea. And this particular one, I did stop before the line, was actually hit by a train. Now, before yes, they had an incident where a train hit a nuclear flask. This was not, however, an accident, nor was it an act of wanton vandalism, nor was it an act of terrorism. No, nothing quite that bad. You see, we've been moving nuclear fuel around the country and nuclear waste around the country from the power stations to the reprocessing facility by rail. And people wanted to know, in fact the CEGB, who were the original owners of our nuclear power stations under the Central Electricity Generating Board, they wanted to know what would happen, how safe are these flasks? You know, can they withstand the worst case scenario of being hit by a express train? So that's exactly what they did. They took the flask, or the flask carrier, to the old Dolby test track. They filled it full of water and they put in measuring equipment and a simulated load of nuclear fuel, which is actually, I believe it was steel rebar made up into an analogue of a nuclear fuel assembly. Filled the flask up, bolted the lid down, torqued it down, welded it shut, so everything is all as it should be. Then he gets an old locomotive and 4 carriages, and this locomotive has reached the end of its service life. Yeah, they were withdrawing the class, so they took some Mark 1 coaches, which were the heaviest coaches that we had at the time. Yeah, okay, we got the Mark 3 and the Mark 2, which are very much more modern design, but they're lighter. The Mark 1 may have been slightly heavier. Coupled them up, and then obviously modified the locomotive so that it didn't need a driver at the wheel. Which is a pretty good thing, really, because this thing was going to go 100 mile an hour into a nuclear flask. The driver gets out, closes the door, and you've got a little hand throttle on the side of the locomotive by the bogie. He just pushes that forwards, ramped up the locomotive to full power, and the thing began to accelerate away down the track. It built up speed, kept on building up speed, and comes around this bend. It gets up to about 110 miles per hour, which was the fastest speed that this particular locomotive was capable of doing. Comes around the corner, bang! Straight into this nuclear flask. The flask goes flying. The engine leaves the locomotive. The locomotive is just a blazing fireball. It comes to, as it fuel line ruptures and everything else just breaks open. And anything that on the train that can burn did burn briefly. It all came to rest. There's a big pile of earth and gravel that had been gouged up out the ground. Engineers came over and just had a look at this nuclear flask. It was surprisingly intact. Yeah, this flask had been through drop tests. They set the flask on fire at a laboratory. Yeah, to check its thermal properties. Now it survived that. They dropped it 40 feet on its corner. It survived that. Yeah. No way can this flask survive being hit by a train, but yep, it did. The outside of the flask is, it's got various fins all the way around it to help radiate the heat, give the thing more surface area. And these fins are about 2 inches thick and about 6 or 7, about 12 inches long actually, from the base of where they are when you hit the flask to the very end. And obviously they're the full height of the flask. This flask is about 7 foot tall. It's a cube. 7 foot by 7 foot by 7 foot. And it's like, all they've done is bend to them. But it hadn't bent them a great deal, bent them about an inch out of alignment. The lid, the outer lid, yeah, that had moved because that's just an outer lid, that's just a dust protector more than anything else. And it has had plenty of opportunities to break up. No, it's survived intact and it's on display. Obviously you get to go around this power station. You had to book in advance. Now some of them you can no longer do this because the stations have been shut down. You can still probably go to the visitor centre because each one has a visitor centre there. And you get to go around, you get to see a mock-up of a fuel assembly. These things are pretty big, and they put them inside the reactor, and obviously their energy is consumed. You know, the uranium is burned, not burned as in on fire, but burned in the same way that an electric motor burns electricity out of a out of a battery. You know, and a diesel engine burns its diesel fuel. It extracts the energy. Doesn't physically catch fire. Burn is really the wrong word, but it's the only way as a layman I can put it across to you, because obviously you burn fuel to extract its energy. You know, you burn coal, you burn wood in a wood burning locomotive, you burn diesel fuel in a diesel locomotive. So I use the term burn uranium to burn its fuel. Because obviously if it physically was burning in a carbon dioxide filled reactor, you've got a problem. Because one, the AGRs are gas cooled, they are big gas cooled nuclear reactors. Whereas our only other ones that we've got were the Magnox reactors, which again are gas cooled, although there's none of those in operation now, they've all been shut down, pardon me. Many of which are in various stages of decommission. And we have Sizewell B, which is a pressurised water reactor. Which has to be shut down for refueling. The Magnox and the AGRs, you can refuel them on load. Just wind the power down about 20-30% and refuel them. With a huge, great, big, fuck-off heavy machine. and they're a completely, wholly British designed nuclear reactor. Now, my take with the Magnox, which came before the AGR, is why the devil have we shut them down? They were perfectly safe. We shouldn't have really decommissioned them until we've got replacements for them. But we haven't got the replacements. We haven't even started building these EPRs yet. Yeah, so we should have quite simply just mothballed them, shut them down, put them in taken the fuel out of them, but left them fully pressurised. So all we needed to do is come along. It's like, we got a problem. Yeah, Russia turned off the gas. We need to reinstate the Magnox plants. Ring up the fuel supplier. Yeah, can we have 200 Magnox fuel rods? A month later, they deliver, they're put in the power station, and boom, the Magnoxes are back online. Whilst construction of the EPRs goes ahead. That's what we should have done, but no, we didn't. I mean, yeah, the Magnox designs, they date back to, the late 50s. But they were good, they were stable, they were a safe design. They were designed to fail safe. "35 minutes later, we arrive in France. But because of lack of government foresight, we made the mistake of shutting them down prematurely, in my humble opinion. So, welcome to France. We got about half a tank of fuel left. Well, that'll get us to Saint Laurent. I think one of the reasons why we shut down Magnox is because of a little bit of an oopsie that the Russians had, or rather the Soviets had, in 1986. At a small nuclear power station that has come to epitomise everybody's fear of nuclear power, why nuclear power is perceived to be dangerous. Yeah, Chernobyl. They designed that reactor with no secondary containment, by the looks of it, no primary containment either. They just had the biological shield with a big thick lid and a slab of concrete on top of it. And a flawed design that everybody knew about in the Russian authorities, but they didn't really do anything about it. It was fine. It's as fine as Russian technology. It is perfectly safe. It is not going to be a problem. Just make sure to operate the reactor above a high power level, because it is not like going to below a low power setting. But we need to do a safety test to ensure that the diesel generators can run before the turbines does. But to do this, we need to make sure that we do it at a low power. Bang! Oops. They knew about the faults but didn't tell the plant operators. And that was a big problem. Now, of course, when that happened, everyone's like, oh, nuclear power, oh, dangerous, dangerous, we don't want. Germany shuts its down. America stops construction on some of its plants. We then start to consider taking the Magnox plants offline prematurely. And didn't bother to replace them because people didn't want nuclear power plants in their backyard. And now we need them. Oh dear. Now, if you follow a couple of other channels, Kyle Hill and Radioactive Drew, these are Americans and they know their stuff. I can honestly say that our fear of nuclear power is unfounded. Because out of a small lump of uranium-235 or natural uranium-238 as used in some reactors, has more energy. You know, a football-sized lump of uranium has more usable energy than an entire truckload of coal. Without all the carbon. So by using atomic power as opposed to fossil power, be it gas, be it coal, be it oil, you've got very good low carbon generation. And as for the waste, got high grade, which is the spent fuel. Well, modern reactors are probably getting to the point where they don't generate as much waste because they can use more of the energy. So they don't need as much uranium in there in the first place, which is going to reduce your waste. Oh God, it smells nice. Yeah. Oh, going back to the tour around the power plant, I was also surprised just how clean it was. And there's a reason for this. Haitium is a gas-cooled, graphite-moderated reactor design. So you've got lumps of graphite with holes drilled through them, which make up the core of a reactor. What the moderator does is it slows down neutrons. So neutrons have a more likely of a chance of hitting other atoms to split them. As they split, they generate heat. If you moderate it too much, you don't get the splits. If you don't moderate it enough, your atoms will fly by and miss each other. I think that's how it works. And the net result is you've got to get no heat, so you need to moderate the reactor with the reaction to ensure that you have the best chance of the atoms physically slamming into each other. Bang! Ping! Off they go. And they'll slam into two others, slam into two others, and so on and so on and so on. Which creates a chain reaction. That generates heat. And obviously you've got control rods which absorb additional neutrons to ensure that you don't get a runaway. And this is all well and good, but it's graphite. And if any of you have ever used pencils, where you have a wooden tube with a slug of graphite goes in the middle, like you have to keep sharpening every so often. You run it along the floor, paper or whatever, it leaves a black line. Now, this black line is made by leaving a lump of graphite, leaving a trail of graphite behind. Now, what's all that got to do with keeping the charge face of a nuclear reactor clean? Well, quite simply, you put the fuel rod in, it's rubbing against graphite, and you've got gas down there circulating at high pressure at high speed. Now, if any of you have ever used seen somebody use an air duster, and you got low, or even a jet washer for them. A jet washer is probably a better analogy. Or even a leaf blower. You've got all this debris and what's it moving around inside the reactor. Flakes get moved off because it erodes. Gas at the pressure that it's in behaves pretty much like a liquid, and that results in water, like water eroding pebbles and stuff, what have you. So you've got to get the possibility, although very small, of when you put in the nuclear fuel, you have to open up one of the feed channels. This machine pushes down on the standpipe, pushes it down, twists it, lifts it up. At that point, the fueling machine is now exposed to the core of the reactor. The cartridge rotates round, and the grabber goes back down inside the reactor, locks onto the spent nuclear fuel, pulls that out into the cartridge, rotates it round again, and then picks up the new fuel rod, lifts it up, and the locks, I presume, is probably got some drop locks. They retract, and then the thing lowers back down to the reactor. And because you've got the risk of a microscopic piece of graphite blowing up the standpipe, we need to see that. Once it's obviously drops down, it then retracts its arm, rotates the thing round again, grabs onto the lid of the standpipe, picks it up, lowers it down, pushes it in, twists it and releases it, and it's then held back in place. But if you've then had a small grain of sand sized piece of uranium or even graphite come up the pipe, because it's been pushed up there, because it's come out it's been floating around and it ends up there, you need to find it. Yeah, the alarms will go off, but then you have to pick it up, deal with it. So they keep it clean so you can see any potential contaminants. And there we are inside this building, looking down on top of the charge face from a gallery with a glass about 10 mil thick. It's a big sheet of glass. Looking down, we were about 40 foot up from the charge face of the reactor, looking down on it. Whilst I was in there, we also got to look over the turbine hall. Which is absolutely massive. Well, it's only got 2 turbines in there. Turbine from reactor 1, turbine from reactor 2. I don't think they can be cross-fed. And there we are, it's like, obviously steam powered. But we're still there, so I wonder what kind of dose I'll be picking up. So I ain't got a dosimeter. I wasn't given a dosimeter. Because it wasn't working side. In 2006, I had a flight across the United States. And in 2004, I had a flight that was about an hour and a half long across to Holland. Half an hour on one of those flights, I would have received more radiation dose than the 2-hour tour around Haitian. So everybody's still that frightened about nuclear power. Don't be. Embrace it. Embrace the nuclear lifestyle. It will not harm you. I mean, people are obviously worried about, oh, but they use seawater for cooling, and but how do they? Won't there be nuclear contamination of the water? Nope. Not unless you have a water-cooled reactor with an open circuit, which would then use outside water for cooling. Well, you don't want to do that if you've got using seawater. You see, the age of modern boiling water reactor, pressurized water reactor, and a gas cooled, you have multiple circuits. There's only one open-ended circuit, and that is cooling the condensers. So you have your first circuit, which is your reactor coolant, and then you have, in case of a boiling water reactor, the water physically boils like a kettle. It comes in the bottom of the reactor, rises up, passes nuclear fuel, heats it up, turns the water into steam. The steam flows down to a turbine, but then it's got to cool down. So it goes to a radiator grill. Inside this radiator grill, it is got water flowing through the radiator. Very much like how a car does it. So where you look at the radiator face of a car, that's in water. That's what's blasting through all the time. So of course, your steam comes in the pipes inside the radiator, flows down. These pipes are encased in cold water. Water gets turned back to steam, gets turned back to water. It then flows back to the reactor to begin the cycle again. That water that has cooled down the condenser just gets either through a cooling tower where its heat is dissipated that way, or back out to sea. That's a simple design. Quite common in the United States, not so common over here. Don't think we have any. But then you've got gas cooled and the gas cooled reactor. Now the gas can't spin the turbines, but it can absorb quite a bit of heat. So that heat is then flows down to a radiator, a heat exchanger, blows over the radiator. Going through this radiator are deionized water. That turns to steam through the turbines, through another radiator, which is immersed in cold water, comes back, it's the gas cooled heat exchanger, and so on and so on and so on. So that's circuit 2. Circuit 3 is the open-ended one. There's absolutely no physical way that you can get radioactive contamination from the heat circuit to the open-ended circuit. Yes, in boiling water reactors, if you get a break in the heat exchanger, you have got that possibility. why boiling water reactors generally don't use seawater for cooling. They still use a 3-circuit system. You have the condenser circuit, and then you have a cooler for the condenser circuit. That separates that out. Obviously, with a pressurized water reactor, you have the same setup as a gas reactor, except one crucial difference. You have water under so much pressure inside the reactor that it physically cannot boil. That just gets very, very hot, turns another water in another circuit into steam, which spins the turbines, which then gets cooled by another circuit. Again, you've got no chance of a radioactive leak through the coolant circuit. What a great idea! I mean, obviously in some authoritarian states, Russia, North Korea and the likes, when they were racing to produce the atomic bomb, they didn't give a fuck about the environment. They just didn't care. All they cared about is getting your plutonium out of the reactor. So there is one place in Russia, I think it is, that literally has an open circuit. Use a lake to go through, cool the reactor core, straight back out again. So they weren't particularly bothered. All they cared about is getting plutonium. Well, we also had a plutonium generating manufacturing reactor. It's called Doonray. And it was a sodium cooled nuclear reactor. Liquid cooled by basically liquid metal. Sodium gets that hot, it melts. Circulates around the system, and that was used to take the heat away. Speaking about sodium, dangerous when wet. I think I was probably carrying sodium. So as far as I'm concerned, the UK government should push on with its plan to build large nuclear power stations, but also small modular ones, the SMRs. These are basically taking a marine reactor, typically the type used on submarines, to have small nuclear generating stations. Which is a great idea, because we've got all around the country, we've got Bullington Power Station, Drakelow Power Station, Ironbridge Power Station, Rugeley. They're all decommissioned, but they're all by a source of water. So you got cooling water there, So why not do that? NIMBYs. Not in my backyard. You don't want solar panels, you don't want wind turbines in your backyard because you think they're ugly. But you don't want high gas prices, high electricity prices because of the high price of gas. You don't want coal because obviously coal, carbon dioxide. Now these here, at Saint Laurent power station, those are French gas-cooled, horizontally charged reactors. Very similar to our old Magnox design. Where you've got a vertical cooling circuit and a horizontally mounted reactor where you just simply push the fuel through. As opposed to pressurized water reactors over there. These are the original reactors of Saint Laurent power station. They're decommissioned now. But they're based on the Magnox design, just rotated round slightly. Well, Saint Laurent. Very strange how to have the sides of the cooling tower all boxed in like that. Very weird. These are the back of the containment structures for Saint Laurent power station. Papers, show me pass. You seem really interested. And here we are. Let's see. Oh, it wants me down there, does it? Okay. So just going to have a look at this drop point. Right. No, Yasmin, she ain't gonna ring you yet. You keep looking at your phone. Time me to park here for a bit until they got a bay free. That is that. That's it. We have now arrived. All I've got to do now is obviously hand in my paperwork, deliver the load, and that ends that.